Well, a leading autism expert is warning that state funding cuts will cause long-term damage to children with autism spectrum disorder. Around the country, funding for high-functioning autistic children is under review. Thousands of families are affected as children are forced from special schools into mainstream schools. Hamish Fitzsimmons reports, and the producer was Candice Talberg.
For children on the autism spectrum, even a specialist school can be a difficult place. Now many parents are faced with putting their kids into mainstream school for the first time, with governments changing funding arrangements so there are fewer places at specialist schools.
Everyone's just saying that he'll really struggle. I mean, you know, the words that he'll flounder, go backwards.
Now with autism, it's not just in learning abilities, it's socialising, managing their emotions, coping with a sensory sensitivity, which means that for many children with autism, a typical classroom is hell.
Victoria's testing for special needs assistance includes a language exam, which often results in autistic children who've strong language skills being told they should attend mainstream schools with no additional support. The parents of 11-year-old Ethan Davis were told he will be going to a local high school next year after attending a specialist school.
Ethan was reassessed in May of this year, and his IQ has come up too high, and basically we're being told that we have to find a mainstream school for Ethan, and this is, I guess, goes against the advice that we're receiving from, you know, Ethan's psychologist, his paediatrician, GP, and even some of the staff within the school.
Did you enjoy your stuff?
Not real well. I did do cooking.
Did you learn lots?
Janine Baker was also told her son William must go to a mainstream high school.
I didn't even know there was a mandatory funding review at Year 6. As far as I was concerned, William's in the equivalent of Year 6 at his school, and next year he'd be going into the equivalent of Year 7.
There's a concern that cutting special needs funding is a short-term saving.
In the long term, there are going to be major problems in terms of that person, shall we say, not having the support, that training that they're going to need to be independent adults. So in other words, they're going to be on a pension rather than a taxpayer.
It's not just happening in Victoria. In May, the New South Wales government cut funding for disability support in 272 schools. New money has been provided by the federal government, but students aren't getting the support they need, and parents say other children will also be affected.
It could be 5 minutes, it could be 50 minutes, where the elevation can get to a level where he does become violent, hides under tables screaming, that sort of thing, and the children would miss out on being instructed. It's as simple as that.
I think that our teachers have got a hard enough job as it is. There's no doubt that Ethan's going to take extra time away from that teacher, which is going to affect the other kids in the classes.
The mainstream schools that Ethan and William are due to attend are like most and aren't capable of supporting autistic students without qualified teacher aides, according to leading autism expert Tony Atwood.
Often what happens is the education authorities will say, well, we'll give you a teacher aide, but it's nowhere near enough in time and they're not trained enough. And this is not fair on the child, their families who've got to suffer the consequences of that child who doesn't want to go to school, but it's not fair on the teacher and it's not fair on the other children.
Parents of autistic spectrum kids fear because their children are different, they'll suffer socially. A recent study by Bond University found 80% of children with forms of autism were bullied at school.
Kids can either be very maternal or predatory. In every class there will be predators, and this is an area that I find as a clinician I'm having to deal with the effects of bullying and teasing that happened 20 or 30 years ago for adults who are still traumatised by what happened.
Janine Baker has been through the trauma of watching William struggle socially, such as when she tried to involve him in Scouts.
They were playing a game where they had to have two teams, and the team leader, trying to be inclusive of William, made him one of the team leaders and said to the other kids, line up behind a team leader, and nobody lined up behind William. And he just looked and said, why isn't there anybody on my team?
Adam Davis faces a similar predicament with Ethan.
The only way we may get funding is for Ethan to get to the point where he's that anxious that, becomes extremely withdrawn, might have trouble sleeping, and other health difficulties. And, we've never needed to medicate Ethan, but we're being told that, that is quite possibly be the case.
Janine Baker knows what she'll do if William is forced into mainstream high school.
If he doesn't get funding, I won't be sending him to a mainstream school. I won't be doing it. I'll be keeping him at home. He would never, ever survive.
Hamish Fitzsimmons, Late Line.